title came about through my back surgery, and also prior to the back surgery. I was so dependent on everyone for everything. And the vulnerability you feel in that place is so, I just had not ever experienced before. Then this idea came to me that I didn't just want to do the tattooed bodies, but that I thought, well, there's lots of real estate if the hair is shaved. And then I just really liked this idea of the vulnerability that women have when their head is shorn. Because as women in the society in general, we're supposed to have no body hair, but lots of hair here. And so the idea of someone who is strong in that kind of, I feel like you could call it nakedness, without this sort of security of hair, which, I think also for women who have either alopecia or who had radiation and chemo and, have to confront themselves with the hair loss. But I just felt so dependent and so naked in my dependency to others. It was such a hard time, and I think that really plays into the work and the poetry that I chose, which in general is about trusting nevertheless. It's a lot about sort of the subtleties of God connection in the midst of the storm of feeling so uncomfortable and so helpless and also in so much pain. So those wove into all the poetry, kind of wove into the imagery, which sometimes the imagery precedes a poem, and sometimes I find a poem or an excerpt or maybe just a word, and then I start picking out imagery that just feels right for it. It's not a very conscious putting it all together so it fits really tightly. It really happens in the flow of the moment. I found her poetry last summer, and I immediately realized that she was, like so many other poets that are like kind of a new feminist young poet, and her work is like an updated version of the mystics of the past. Her name is Shalane Harkin, and they really spoke to me. They spoke to me about the real spirituality, the messy spirituality, the spirituality that goes voting and goes to a rally and includes the good, bad, and ugly in life, and yet connects with a deeper source within. The poems are they're like little prompts that spark something and that I feel I want to incorporate. And I just was so inspired by beautiful tattoos that have all these different scripts. That kind of got me going. And then poetry, because I'm not a poet, I felt like, okay, I'm going to use poems and excerpts from poems. I just was fascinated with also people in real life who decide to tattoo their faces or their necks or their heads. It just seemed like such an intense thing to do. And I think I have a penchant for intensity and pushing things to the limit and creating something that is at once fascinating and really beautiful. But I think especially bald women, we're used to bald men, right? Bruce Willis, whatever. It's the cool thing now to have the shaved head. If women are shaved, that is still kind of like almost repulsive maybe, or off-putting, or frightening even. It just has kind of a certain toughness to it too. And I think that's just sort of something that I was drawn to and that I ran with. I always like this idea of balancing the work, where on one hand, I am not moving completely into beauty, and I'm also not moving into terror, which for me is such a theme that I've tattooed it on my arm. And it comes from a poem of Rainer Maria Rilke called Go to the Limits of Your Longing, which is such an incredible poem and also speaks to this stepping forward into a place that feels uncomfortable, doing it anyway because it's frightening, but there's something, at least in me, that goes, but you gotta go. There's like some voice that says, I know it's really scary. You don't know what's over the horizon, but my longing is guiding me forward. I know that the bald women are a little tougher to sell. They're certainly a lot tougher to sell than the bucolic scenes that I did pre-Trump with flowing dresses, children, rabbits, insects, flowers, European style bucolic landscape, which for me, that just abruptly came to a screeching halt when Trump was elected. And I think, like so many people, was really caught off guard. And I realized that I lived too much in my bubble. And I was completely disoriented afterwards. All the mud that rose with that election, and the ugliness and the misogyny and the racism and everything in those last 4 years were just so in our faces. So for me, it was just unacceptable to go back to just rabbits and girls and anything that came before. Despite that I'm often still inspired by older work, or I look at things and I re-reference things, it's kind of like, I always explain it like it's a little bit like a spiral staircase where there's certain points that are still the same view as I'm ascending, but the perspective is different, and I revisit something, but it's out of it's within a new context. And whenever I sell prints that are older works, they always do great. Oh, we love the woman with the bees. Oh, we love the bird's nest thing. I'm like, I know, but I would cripple myself if I were going back to it just for, oh, that's more popular. This gets more likes. This sells better. I really love the watercolors, and it's really taken me quite a bit of time till I felt secure in the material and the watercolors themselves, and finding my voice in watercolor. I think first I tried to handle the watercolor very much like I handle the paintings, and the way I use paint, so that they were much more painted out and layered. And I didn't like that as much, but it took a while. I mean, I think watercolor is the hardest medium. I like that I have to be so focused, and yet the fluidity is so relaxed. It's kind of this interesting place in between where you do one wrong thing and you can throw the whole thing out. It's over. It's over. I mean, it's very seldom that you can make it work right. Usually it's like, darn it, especially when it's the big pieces of paper. But there's something in the watercolors, and sometimes the painting comes first, and then I like it so much, I do the watercolor after. Like with the piece Seek, I was like, oh, I want to do this in watercolor. And with some, the watercolor comes first, and then I work with the idea as a painting. And the watercolors, they're more direct. They speak very eloquently of something that's very delicate and tender. It's really seeing the nuances, and I love work on paper. I've always been someone who loves to work on paper. I think they're very, especially at the beginning of the pandemic when we were just in lockdown, I could really only do those. And also when I recovered enough from my surgery, I felt like I just want to breathe into these watercolors. I just feel they're really healing.